Hey folks, it's Brian Gregg here. Today we're going to be looking at the Phaser framework. This is a game development library for JavaScript for creating games that are accessible across different devices, across different platforms, using HTML5 standards and the HTML5 canvas element. If you haven't taken a look at Phaser, go over to phaser.io and take a look at some of the games that have been created using that. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the structure of a Phaser application. So here we have a directory structure that I've created that has an index.html in it, which is going to load all of our dependent script files, as well as create a div on the page called game div, which is where we're going to render our content. We've also got an assets directory here, which I've put some subfolders in there for maps, music, sounds, and sprites. And this characters.png, this is the sprite sheet that we're going to be using. If you've never used a sprite sheet before, they're indexed files that have different frames of animation or different characters that can be used in a game as assets. We have some space marines here and some astronauts and some aliens and scientists and mutants, etc. that we're going to be using as we build out kind of a roguelike space-themed game. So getting back to our main game here, the first script that we're loading is in our vendor folder. It's the library itself. And then we are going to go through and load the respective JavaScript files for the boot, load, title, and play phases. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to load a game.js, which is the main driver here. This game.js is going to create a new object for using the Phaser object. That's part of the Phaser library. I'm going to assign that to game. And we're going to give it a width and a height. And we're going to target it to the game div ID, which is going to create our canvas element on the page. Then we're going to go through and we're going to add each of the game states, the boot, load, title, and play game states. And then we're going to call the initial state, which is boot. Boot's going to go through and it's going to start our physics system, and it's then going to immediately kick over into our load phase. We can also do some other pre-rendering type stuff in this phase if we need to. We won't be revisiting this state too often in the tutorial series. But we will be taking a look at the load phase. This is important in that we will be loading a label to the screen, which will tell us if the assets are loading. And then we'll be setting our scale, our alignment, background color, and other preloader type of functions. And then we're actually going to be loading our assets here. So any of our graphic and sound assets will be loaded, including that sprite sheet that I was referring to earlier. Some important things. One is that we're going to refer to that sprite sheet as characters throughout the rest of the application. And we're going to be giving the dimensions of the images in that file so that it knows where to start and end each file, so that it knows how many pixels wide and how many pixels high each of the sprites are within that sprite sheet. We'll take a look at audio assets in a later screencast. And then we're going to kick it over to the title state. The title state is just really straightforward. It's going to present a label on the screen using the game.add.text. Remember, game is the object, the global object that we created to reference our game. And we are going to set up a listener here for our pointer. So our pointer in this case is going to be our mouse, but could also be your finger if you're working on a touch device, etc. I'm going to set that to true so that it's listening. And then in our update phase, we're going to wait for the user to click or touch the screen to kick it on over into the next phase, the play phase. And this play phase is going to be where our main game loop takes place. We are going to create a player object, and that player is going to be created by adding a sprite from our character sprite sheet. We're going to give it an X and a Y position. We're going to define which frame we want to use from the sprite sheet. So 0 is going to give us the first frame in that sprite sheet. And we're going to add that player to the page, and we're going to set the anchor, which basically is going to matter when we start trying to figure out where we're going to position our player on the screen. Then we're going to have an update function too, which is where every time the screen is repainted, where we're going to be able to set all of the actions that handle input and handle re-rendering of the screen. So here's our application right here. I'm just going to refresh the page. Really briefly, you could see that it said loading. That was where it was loading these assets here. And it loaded pretty quickly because we're loading it locally, but if this was being loaded over a network, it would likely take much longer time. Then it kicks right over into our title screen like we would expect it to. And in our title screen, we are expecting our pointer to click. So we will click, and there is our character. So again, this is jumping over into the play state. And within the play state, we can go ahead and make some changes here if we want to. If we say changed the X coordinate for where our character was going to start. Let's see. And that shifts him over to the left. If we were to shift him over to the right, actually put him a little too far off the screen. So that's one of the things. If you go beyond the bounding rectangle of the sheet itself, let's just make sure that he's within. There we go. So that puts him 300 pixels to the right and 200 pixels down. And if we wanted to, let's just go take a look at our sprite sheet again. This is showing him in the 0th index of this. So let's say we wanted to have him draw his gun. We can go ahead and change this frame right here to 2. Because remember, we start with 0 because this is going to be an array. So we're going 0, 1, 2. Let's save that. And that'll draw his gun. If we wanted to, say, jump down to one of these images way down here. I don't have the mappings for them, but let's just pick something at random. Let's just say 90, and let's see what that gives us. And that changes him to this blue amorphous blob or whatever that is over there. So this will be useful when we're defining different characters on the screen. We'll have to define which frames that we want to use for them. As we're creating animations, we'll need to know the different images that represent the different states of those animations, and so forth. But this should give you a general idea of the setup of a Phaser game. I'll be putting some of this content out on my GitHub repository. Obviously, these images are copyrighted, so I'll see if I can find some freely available images to maybe include as a sprite sheet in the GitHub so that you can download them and play around with them, but I'll definitely be putting the code out there. If there are specific questions or topics that you want me to cover, definitely let me know. Get me on Twitter at ignorantuition or through my YouTube channel, and definitely looking for feedback. All right, great. I'll see you in the next video.